Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Safe Defend Live. I'm Phil Nichols, joined today again by my friend, and I think the most professional, most knowledgeable guy I've ever seen about anything that has to do with staying alive, Dr. Greg Vecchi. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. I don't know about that, but I try. I do my best, man.
Well, I was telling somebody the other day that somebody went back and watched one of the previous episodes that you were on, and this guy's in law enforcement. This is the second law enforcement guy that I know that said, I know Dr. Vecchi. And I said, really? Where do you? Well, I know of him. so little old Oklahoma, you've got a fan club here. So it's always good to hear from law enforcement professionals and their perspectives on what we're talking about, to get feedback and very positive. They always bring up right a bang, left a bang. They always talk about that. And so we appreciate you very much and what you're doing. And I know today we're going to talk a little bit about something that everybody always discusses after the fact, which is law enforcement response time to an active killer situation, whether it's active shooter or somebody that has a knife, or, I talked about the unfortunate, horrible, tragic incident here in Oklahoma a few years back where somebody used a car at a large parade to eliminate people. No matter what the situation, response time seems to always, I should say, no matter what the weapon used, response time is always a conversation after the fact.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The thing is that, and this is, I don't know, this is a really tough one, because in almost all these situations, someone has either been injured or killed, even if the police have a great response time. And so the question is, wow, they had a great response time, yet we got people that are dying or getting, injured and things like that. And so I think that we have to, when we think about this, and especially the importance of the training, right? And we talk a lot about left to bang on this show, and
Yep.
I think that's absolutely critical, and that's kind of my favorite area and stuff like this. But here's the bottom line: you're not going to be able to stop all of them, and that's frankly why SafeDefend came into existence in the first place. It wasn't because they were preventing things, right? It was because they having to deal with this carnage and the massacres and all the trauma associated with this, right? So one of the things that I think is important to understand is, this notification and response thing. We always talk about the police response, right? And we've had police responses that were a minute or less, and
Right.
still people killed. One of the examples I can think of on that is that 2018, the Capitol Gazette
Yep.
shooting that happened in, I think it was in Annapolis, up in DC area.
Yep.
The
Yep.
police had a 1 minute response time and 5 people were killed.
Yep.
Okay, so the question is, okay, let's look at that a little bit, because it's really not about how fast the police respond. That's not the whole picture. And it's also one of those things you got to realize is the police are doing their best. The police are not, this isn't a police issue. This is a time issue. It's just a situational issue that we have to kind of break down. And so, so a couple of things, right? I mean, even one of the most recent ones, a Covenant shooting, right? In Nashville, right?
Yeah.
We had it was 16 minutes from the time the shooter entered the school till she was actually stopped by the police. What happened? We had 3 kids, 3 adults that were killed. Police had a great response time, still didn't work, right? And so one of the things we want to kind of look at, or at least I guess examine or analyze a little bit, is why does this happen? It's not just about the police response time. It's about a lot of other things, and I kind of came up with 4 reasons why this happens. Okay. And what drives these 4 reasons, and the reason that about 20% of these attacks are actually successfully responded to and dealt with by police. What that means, and this is kind of the scary statistic, but it's a fact, is that about 80% of the time you're on your own. So if you are in a school, you're in a workplace, you're in a campus, a church, whatever, once that attack happens, because 80% of the chance it's going to be over with before the police arrive. So that 80% of percentages that you're on your own is really what's scary, and really what I want to focus on. And talking about why does this happen? Well, there's like 4 reasons, right, I can think of. So the first reason is that there's almost always a delay in contacting
Yeah.
911, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
the police aren't even going to respond, aren't even going to know what to do, that it's even happening, right? Until they get notification, and almost always it's from 911. That's when the police response starts. So that gap on there, well, let's talk about that, right? Well, first of all, we know what happens. We just talked about Covenant, that Covenant school, right? Well, we go back to that the newspaper one I told you about. It was a 1 minute response, 5 people died, right? Well, during that time, one person texted their mom, and then texted, and then called their mom, and then called 911.
Right.
Another
Right.
person texted, or not texted, but got on Twitter and tweeted, "Hey, we're under attack, and here's the address." He gave the address, but here's the deal: that's not 911. And so,
Right.
even if you can find and get on the phone to 911, you're dealing with the extreme stress that your life is in danger and other people's
Well,
lives are in danger. You've got.
well, the
Go ahead.
fog of war, right? The fog
Right.
of war. I
Right.
mean, we've talked about fog of war in the past, and I think it's this simple. 100% of the time, we don't know about it until there's been multiple deaths.
Right.
I mean, at the earliest. But if you put yourself in that situation, right, where you're let's say you're the front desk at a school, you're in the administrative office, and somebody enters with a weapon, even if they don't engage the people that are in that front office, that administrative office, how do you process that? We're asking somebody who typically is checking kids in and out, doing an administrative task. They're there to serve the kids. It's easy after the fact to say, well, why didn't they call police right away?
That kind of comes down to reason number one. First of all, it's a training issue, right? Which is really what that's the fix on this, or that's the thing to do. But aside from the training, you're looking at, well, what happens? Like this scenario you just described, right? You hear a gunshot, you see somebody go down, you see somebody bleeding, you got the alarms are going off, whatever's going on, right? Doesn't matter who you are. You're going to be startled.
Yep.
You're going to freeze.
Yep.
You're going to get obviously scared out of your head, right? Okay. And here's another thing that we see happens with people once this body alarm response kicks in, right? They oftentimes hesitate because they have disbelief. They don't believe. They go, oh, that couldn't be a gunshot. Or the guy who's in the military, right? I've been in the military 30 years. Was in the military 30 years, and I know what a gunshot. That wasn't a gunshot. Well, it's that disbelief and that freeze there that really wastes precious seconds to run, hide, or fight, right? If you need to do that.
Let me give you a real world example. My wife and I are in St. Louis a couple weeks ago. We're out in front of our kids' house. We're doing some yard work, just enjoying some time with our kids. And you hear this bang, 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 real fast, right? And I've been around rounds discharging a ton in the military, and my first words out of my mouth were, "Is that gunfire?" I mean, I didn't, and then I paused for a second, and a few more. I said, "Oh, that's firecrackers." We moved on. Right. But even somebody that is around it, to your point, that's heard thousands and thousands of rounds go off in their life, human nature is you pause. Right. You absolutely do freeze. A lot of people, that old saying, fight or flight. Some people have fight instincts. Some people have flight instincts. That's not a judgment. It's just some people's first reaction when they're startled is to run. They don't even know where they're running. They just want to run. Right. They just want to get away.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So what you're describing is what we call the body alarm response.
Yeah.
Body alarm response is just that. It's the adrenaline dump, right? It is the freeze, flight or fight syndrome. And usually it goes in that order. You hear something, you're not sure what it is. It's like a rattlesnake, right? You're walking through the woods and you hear the rattle. What do? You freeze, right? And you start looking around, right? And then if you see the thing, the next thing you're going to do is get out of the way. But if you get cornered by it, or you corner it with babies, right, then you might have to whack it, right? Might have to fight. But here's the bottom line: you lose this auditory exclusion, this disbelief, the loss of fine motor skill. So here's the problem, okay? Not saying that you shouldn't try to call 911, but when you're hearing gunshots and you're afraid for your own life, it's not very easy to pull that phone out and remember the code, right? And then even I've seen people, they can't even remember the order of 911. They misdial it, right? And then once they get to the 911 operator, then they've got to talk about, well, what's going on, what's the location, things like this, and most of them can't do that. And we see this with recordings, right? And so that whole body alarm response is number one. That's reason number one. So when you put this into a statistic, most of these attacks, okay, it takes about 10 minutes for the police to even be notified for just the reasons we talked about. So that's reason number one. So then let's talk about reason number two. Reason number two is the actual police response time. And this is what people over focus on, right? And let's say it's a lightning speed. Let's say it's 3 minutes, right? So they get a call from 911, dispatcher dispatches with the information. The police then have to load up and go, right? So then they arrive at the location. Well, the problem is that there's still more time because they got to find the shooter, they got to find the killer. And so that takes time. Maybe it's multiple. Maybe they say, oh, there's a shooting at the high school. Well, a lot of the districts have more than one high school. Which one? Which building? What location? What floor? What room number? Where did it come from, right? And so once the police get there, they have to find the person. So when you add all this up, max, good for a good response, let's say it's 3 minutes for the police. You add another 10 minutes prior to that notification, there's 13 minutes. Then you add, who knows how much it takes. I don't even have a statistic on that. How long does it take the police to find the bad guy average before they can neutralize it? Well, that's more than 13 minutes. And the fact is that most of these incidences happen in less than 5 minutes. And that is your answer or your reason why in 80% of the time you're going to be on your own. And in almost all situations, you're going to have some sort of injury or death before the police can stop the person. And, we can see this in nearly every case that we look at.
Yeah, I think there's just so much. It always seems like to me, Doc, as just a layman here, that we always oversimplify what we think should have happened after the fact. Mm-hmm. We just, we don't ever factor in human response. We don't ever factor in situational response. There's just all the things that we overlook. And it's really that Monday morning quarterback, I guess, philosophy that most people have is, oh, well, I would have done this. Well, why didn't they do that? Well, they just standing there. Well, first of all, let's talk about that for a second. If somebody's just standing there, so what they usually talk about is when they see law enforcement gathered. Well, this isn't TV. It's not Chuck Norris.
Right.
Once they get there, you're trying to gather intel on the fly. You're trying to figure out where to go. You're trying to get, these are human beings that are walking into a place. I love it when somebody says, well, that's what they get paid to do. Well, you're right. And they also need to go home that night to their families. So they're going to be as quick as they can to respond, to enter the building, but they also have to do it correctly. They have to do it with the best intel they have and try to get the best outcome they have. Mm-hmm. So this isn't TV. And I think that hurts the conversation a lot too, because we try to oversimplify what should have happened.
Yeah.
And then we don't talk about the things that need to happen. So
then, last thing we need to talk about here is, okay, what can you do, right? What can we do? Because we can't do nothing, right? We got to do something.
Right.
Well, first and foremost comes in the fact that you need to be trained in this, right? Because if you have a plan A, which is escape and tactics to escape. If you got a plan B, which is evasion or barricading, you get plan C, which is engage the offender if he breaks the threshold where you're at, whatever you need to do. You got to plan on that and you practice that. This is the only way that you're going to be able to function when your body's in this body alarm response, right? And I would even go further in saying practicing dialing 911 and things like this.
Nope.
I guess I'll move it one step better than that, right? Get the SafeDefend system, because SafeDefend takes that burden off of you to call 911. You don't have to remember or say what it is or anything. You just basically put your finger on the reader. 911 is notified with the address, the location, the building number, who set it off, the room number, the nearest door. So the police get that information, and they get it within 3 seconds, as well as everyone else who has a email or text that's notified by the system, right? So it takes that burden off of you, so you can focus on your training while you're in that light alarm response, so you can, survive this. And the people that actually do that, and you add taking that burden away that SafeDefend does, plus give you the tools, the go bag with the tools for stopping the bleed, which is probably the most important thing, in addition to, the baton and pepper spray and some of the other things we have in there. You are in the best position to survive, and you most likely will.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think what SafeDefend's gotten right over the years is we're trying to get rid of the noise and focus on what gives us the best outcome. Mm-hmm. And I think that when you're talking about life and death, when you're talking about people living or dying, you don't have time for noise. I mean, we just don't. No. I loved our conversation last week about active killer, because they're all active killers, and then there's subsets of active killer, right? I had this conversation came up in a group of friends of mine. One of my friend had sent another friend, and it had to do with active. It was an active shooter story. Mm-hmm. And my one friend said, "So I can tell you right now, we just outlaw, and he went into the outlaw the weapons thing."
Yeah.
And I said, a funny thing is, I got a friend, and I gave him some of your background, and I said, did you know that almost 40% of all killings inside schools are not with a weapon, not with a gun? Mm-hmm. And he goes, really? And I said, yeah. I said, so I guess you can eliminate 60% of them, but not all of them.
So what's the answer? Take away the knives?
Right. So then we take away knives, then we take away this, then we take away this. I mean, and so it's interesting. And these are good people having this conversation. Sure. They're smart people, but
sure,
you just can't. We got to quit worrying about the noise and the feelings, and we got to focus on results. Period. Hard stop. I mean, it's got to be about how can we get the best outcome possible in that situation. Well, Dr. V, I appreciate it as always. You got any final thoughts you want to share with us?
No, just, really, I think the takeaway here is, have a plan and train that plan, and really, really understand and know the ground truth to this, because the ground truth sometimes doesn't fit a political perspective. Right. And so, look at the evidence, look at the research, look at the ground truth, and then build your training and all your other tactics and strategies based on the truth, not on what's on TV or what you think it might be.
Amen, brother. Dr. V, I appreciate you as always. Have a great weekend. Hope you have some time to relax. You've been going 90 miles an hour, 20 different directions. So I appreciate that. And I hopefully you have some time to spend with your bride and some grandkids and kids this weekend, and just enjoy.
Certainly will. Thanks so much, Phil.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye.